So given that we don't know how NIW policies are going to change, would it make sense to look at EB-1A instead right now, since that is probably not going to be as affected, if at all? Because that's what people are doing right now. They're looking at EB-1A instead.
I don't recommend this for most people. I think people should have a general awareness of EB-1A, but most people who were looking at NIW before aren't going to have a good EB-1A case, at least not within the next few years. EB-1A is a much higher standard. EB-2 doesn't really have any standards as far as, extraordinary ability, reputation, acclaim, and all of that. EB-2 is more about showing how you benefit the US. EB-1A is a standards-based category, and you need to show that you are at the top of your field in order to qualify for EB-1A. That's not something that most people can do quickly. I do consult with some people who may be kind of on the line where they have a strong EB-2 NIW case and then maybe a very weak but maybe minimally viable EB-1A. And in that case, maybe it's worth pursuing. But even in those situations, I would recommend just going for the EB-2 NIW. For those of you, though, who are in the situation where you have a tenuous EB-2 NIW case, it's like the attorneys that you've talked to have been hesitant to even have you file that. If you are now looking at EB-1A, just know that it's a much higher standard. And so most people are just not in any kind of position to put that as an immediate plan. Maybe 3 years, 5 years, longer down the road, it can be a plan. But it's not really a substitute. These categories don't really work well substituting in for each other.
But that's not to say you shouldn't be working towards EB-1A, especially if you're an Indian or maybe even Chinese national.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it for Indian nationals. Chinese nationals too, to some degree. I'm not recommending it though for most rest of world people. I mean, you can look at it if you're rest of world, if you already have a really strong profile and you have some urgency to get the green card where you really, really need to get it within the next year or two. In that case, maybe you should look at EB-1A. But if there's not any objective urgency, waiting out in the EB-2 NIW backlog is probably going to be the best way to go for you anyways. Because you're considering now whether to take a couple of years to build towards an EB-1A profile, which is a lot of work, or you're considering waiting in the EB-2 backlog for probably a couple years. The time savings, you might save a year or two, but it's not going to be super significant, especially as compared to India or China. So India or China nationals, Chinese nationals might save several years, so it can be worth it. Indian nationals will save decades, so it's definitely worth it.